Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Nancy came out of the restaurant and smiled. Hooray, after a month of running through all the authorities and organizations in search of work, I was hired as a waitress in a cool new restaurant. So what if I am on probation? So what? The main thing is to catch on. The owner, however, is immediately visible, nasty guy, but that's okay, maybe I will adapt. Phew. Now at least I will have something to pay the rent, and I can buy something for myself. I thought I was going to be lost. Of course, this was not the job she had dreamed of since childhood, but what can you do? On the way home, she began to go over her life since she was born. Nancy was born in a very ordinary, gray, and inconspicuous small town, on the very outskirts of it. The girl's father worked as a high-rise construction worker. He tired like hell, but he got a decent salary. Her mother was from a village, she had no education, so she worked part-time as a janitor. Of course, because of this, the girl got a lot of grief at school. Peers often teased her. Your mother sweeps the yards. There's that old jacket she wears. And her notebooks are always cheated up to the cover so she doesn't have to buy new ones. Don't be friends with her. She never gives a penny for anything. The girl cried and complained to her parents at home. Mom only frowned and muttered, "Don't give a damn about them, daughter. What a bunch of smart guys. I work where I can, I don't sit at home. You'd think you were royalty yourself." And Daddy talked to her long and patiently, trying to comfort her. "You see, my daughter, it's not important what your parents do, but who you are in life, what you've achieved, you know. Not everyone has the intelligence or the ability to become a cool businessman or politician. But everyone can do well in what they have learned. Don't pay any attention to them, they're stupid and cruel. Set yourself a goal and achieve it yourself. Studying on excellent, you're a smart one. The teachers can't get enough of you. They praise you constantly at every meeting. They say you have a talent for mathematics. When you finish high school, your mother and I will save some money and you'll go to university. I promise. And then you'll be the one who's gonna kick their ass. You'll get a prestigious job and you'll live a decent and even better life. Come on, my dear, let's drink tea with croutons." After such heart-to-heart talks with her father, the girl felt better. And she tried even harder, sitting in the library in the evenings and reading additional literature. Secretly, she dreamed of becoming a lawyer, or at least an economist. Maybe her father would really help her. But when Nancy was 14, terrible grief came to the family. Her father had fallen from a great height at a construction site and crashed to his death. The doctors who arrived could do nothing to help. My mother went to the funeral and funeral expenses, having spent almost all the family savings. But she saw her husband off properly. She herself turned black with grief, became gray, and looked 10 years older. The woman had no idea how and on what she and her daughter would survive now. After all, her husband brought the main income into the house, and those kopecks that were paid to the janitor were not enough for food, let alone anything else. She had to run around in the evenings cleaning stairwells and toilets to get out of poverty. Nancy missed her daddy a lot, crying at night, because they were such close and dear people. And most importantly, she realized then that she would never become a lawyer or an economist, because there was no money in the house now. The girl began to help her mother, took over all the housework. On weekends, she ran near the subway to hand out flyers, so she could buy herself lunch or at least a bun for a change. But grief followed their family and did not leave them alone, as if a curse. After 2 years, my mother was gone. She was finished with a hellish job, which finally undermined her health. Nancy had a vague recollection of her mother's funeral, as she screamed and thrashed hysterically. She just didn't understand how she could live alone in the world now. Why had God taken her parents away? What had she done wrong to be left an orphan? They wanted to put the girl in an orphanage, but then her mother's cousin, Aunt Wendy, suddenly remembered her niece and volunteered to be her guardian. Nancy was grateful to her at first, because she was terrified of the horror stories about the orphanages. She imagined how she would be beaten and humiliated, and she didn't want to go there. But after staying with her relatives for a month, everything became clear to her. Her aunt was mean and picky. She had a native son, David, and a hard-drinking husband. Frequent scandals and swearing were normal in this family. In his drunken rages, the father was often violent and could even beat the household, and Nancy had been beaten a couple of times. The drunken father of the family was fierce. "Hey, Wendy, why did you bring that spunger? Not enough mouths of your own. She's been here all day in the kitchen prying her eyes out." The woman shushed him. "Shut up. You live and eat at her expense. I get money from her. So shut up and shut your mouth." But the restless husband grabbed whatever he could get his hands on and ran around the house, trying to hit everyone who came in front of him. At such moments, the frightened Nancy would get dressed and run out into the yard, sitting on the bench until she was blue in the face, until the screaming could not be heard from the apartment. She plugged her ears and prayed quietly, "Lord, I wish this would all be over soon." The neighbors felt sorry for the poor girl who came into this dysfunctional family and was orphaned so early. They often talked about it. "Oh, poor Nancy. So sorry about the girl. That Wendy is so unscrupulous and cunning. She gets the money for the child herself, but she treats her like a stranger. She has no pity." It turned out that a relative had thought of everything dashingly, took the custody money, rented Nancy's apartment, and got a good income from it too, and placed the girl in the kitchen on a cot. And instead of a table for lessons, there was an old mini fridge. Nancy was fed separately, not like everybody else. Meat, fruit, and sweets went only to David, who was obnoxious. She only got the old provolone soup and pasta with sausage. That was the rest of the menu. But her aunt reproached her with a piece of bread every day and tried to load her with more housework. In effect, Nancy became their servant. Wendy itched day and night. "You're ungrateful, Nancy. I took you in, I saved you from the orphanage, I feed you, I sing to you, and you don't do your job. Couldn't you heat up David's soup? Is it so hard?" The girl snapped back. "Your David is 17 years old. You could have heated it yourself. I was ironing the laundry. I'd probably rather be in an orphanage than slave for you like Cinderella." Not only that, but this David, despite the fact that he was her brother, even though he was her third cousin, began to look at her badly and greedily, and when no one was home, to make obscene jokes. "Hey, Nancy, you're pretty. You're beautiful. You've got your legs up to your ears, and you've got a pretty face. Why don't we have some fun? What's the point of wasting time? I'd put you in my bedroom if I could talk my mother into it." The girl was indignant. "What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? Stop it right now, or I'll complain to the Board of Guardians that you're bothering me, and they'll shut your shop down fast." He was furious. "What a fool. Stay on porridge and water. What a prissy princess you are." Nancy cried at night. She thought she was in some nightmare dream that would never end, and she desperately missed her father, her mother, and her old life, which, as it turned out, was not so bad. The girl was counting the days and minutes until she came of age, to finally leave this wicked and inhospitable house. But here she also had to fight for the right to live in her own apartment. Her aunt clung to it with a dead grip and did not want to evict the tenants. Not only that, she started making nasty conversations. "I didn't think you'd be so ungrateful. Why would you want to move into your own apartment now? You don't even have a job. How are you going to live on your own and pay for everything? And anyway, why do you need a big apartment on your own? You see, the three of us have been living here all our lives. What if my David decides to get married? Where would he take his family? And you're young, you should go to NY. You'd find a job there faster, and you'd get married." The girl was indignant and stood her ground. "No, let the tenants move out. It's none of your business how I'm going to live. This is my paternal home, and I'm going to stay in it. I will not leave the city, do not even hope." Nancy knew that her aunt wouldn't get off that easy, so she plucked up the courage to go to the local precinct officer, John. He was a young, hot, but honest and incorruptible guy. The girl cried in his office and told him about her problem. "Uncle John, help me. My aunt was already using me as a servant. I barely waited until my 18th birthday to leave her, and now she doesn't want to evict the tenants and hints me to sign the apartment over to her. It is too small for the three of them, and what should I do? Live in the street? I can't go on like this. Don't think I'll get a job, but I want to live in my parents' apartment, not serve in someone else's house. The policeman shook his head. Don't worry, Nancy. I know Wendy and your situation in general. I'll talk to her. But in the meantime, pack your bags. Everything will be all right. We'll get her straightened out quickly, especially since the law is completely on your side. After talking to the precinct officer, the tenants moved out in a day, and the girl finally moved into her own apartment. She was so happy she could kiss the walls. She hugged her father's portrait and sobbed how much she missed him. Wendy cursed her and promised her a good life, but she ignored her. Let her fret. What did she care? Since Nancy had no money to live on, she searched hard for a job. The chances were slim because of her lack of education and experience, so she was offered jobs as a cleaner or a dishwasher. But the girl remembered what a hell of a job and how it ruined her mother. Immediately before my eyes stood her rough, worn hands with ingrained dirt under her nails. No way. Not again. She decided, and went at random to a new restaurant that had just opened in the center of the city. She had no illusions, but sincerely hoped for her attractiveness and charisma. What if she was lucky? She was led into the master's office. In a chair, lounging imposingly, sat an unpleasant and impudent man with small black eyes and a huge belly that could hardly fit under the table. He looked intently at his guest and immediately noted to himself, "Oh, what a beauty." Blood and milk. Eyebrows astride, eyes with a twist, legs long, a sight to behold. And out loud he casually threw, "What's the name? Give me your papers. Do you have experience?" The girl said quietly, "My name is Nancy. I have no experience. I just finished school. But I will try very hard, and I will learn everything quickly. I really need this job." He looked at her reproachfully. "All right, I'll put you on probation as a trainee. Let's see how you do. And you see to it that everything is on the level and the customers are happy. God forbid you undermine my trust. You'll be out of here in a heartbeat. You can go back to work on Monday. Keep in mind, the restaurant works until the last customer, long shifts. How you'll get there at night, you think for yourself. We don't have a delivery." Nancy was happy. It's a clean job anyway, and you get a tip. Still, it was better than being a janitor or a janitor. She even liked the word restaurant. She really didn't like the owner. He was stiff, even vulgar. There were rumors that he had misappropriated the restaurant and was now running some gray schemes related to cashing out large sums of money through the cashier's office. Nancy tried her best. She pleased everyone, customers and staff alike, though they often teased her about her zeal. Especially Cindy, a waiter with a lot of experience under her belt, made fun of her. "Oh, you fool, Nancy," said, young and green. "If you keep plowing like a hard laborer, you'll run out of steam in no time. Let's see how long you last. Mark my words, I've been through it all before." Cindy was strict, but in fact, not a bad woman. She literally saved Nancy several times when she accidentally broke 2 wine glasses. Cindy quickly cleaned it up and didn't tell anyone anything. The second time the girl mixed up the order, but here too, the experienced Cindy settled the conflict in a flash, apologized, and everything was quickly forgotten. So Nancy followed her around and absorbed everything like a sponge, learning the intricacies and wisdom of the restaurant business, especially since their shifts were always the same. Nancy survived the month-long probationary period, even though she returned home not feeling her arms or legs from fatigue. She was no longer a trainee, but a full-fledged waitress and full member of the team, which gave her strength and self-confidence. Often on a day off, Nancy would lie in bed and dream that now everything would work out well for her, that she would meet her boyfriend, that she would dream of a happy future family and children. Until then, she had not had much luck with suitors, even though she had a very nice appearance, and everyone around her remarked it. Nevertheless, the girl from a poor family who wanted to meet seriously and so have fun maybe. But such short-term relationships didn't appeal to Nancy. She always remembered her mother's instructions. "Daughter, take care of your maiden honor and don't go into bed with just anyone, or you'll be in trouble. A man does his job and goes into the bushes, and we women have to deal with it all alone. But there's a problem. Where can she get acquainted with suitors now? She does not go to places where young people spend time because of her late return from work, and sometimes she is simply not in the mood to go anywhere. And she had no girlfriends, and all the women at work were much older. One day Nancy, as usual, was running to work in the morning, and almost outside the restaurant she saw a tramp. He was a middle-aged man, sitting on the pavement with a few pieces of cardboard on it, and playing a simple tune on his guitar. And so masterfully that Nancy listened, then applauded and put some change in his cap. He raised his head, and she marveled at his bright green and inquisitive eyes and charming smile. The tramp said gratefully, "So my morning started out great. I got the attention of such a beautiful woman, and even treated me to coffee. Thank you, sweetheart, and have a good day." Nancy smiled at these kind and sincere wishes. Her spirits brightened. She sent the tramp a playful air kiss and ran off to the restaurant, clattering her heels on the pavement. All day and into the night, Nancy thought about that stranger. His temples were silvered with gray. Apparently he had been through a lot of trouble in his life, too. Strange, I walk this route all the time, and I've never seen him here before. I wonder who he is and why he was on the street. He's obviously not a drunken drunkard or a bum with a record. The next morning, the situation was the same. Only now the tramp was playing a sad and heart-rending tune, right to the point of tears. A large crowd of onlookers gathered around him. Many clapped their hands and showed their class, throwing change into his cap. The homeless man turned out to be a very well-mannered young man who never begged for money. And when people threw money at him, he always thanked them politely. He never pressed for pity or demanded more than he was given. So Nancy couldn't resist putting some change in his cap. The tramp raised his head again, recognized her, and spoke softly. "Thank you. May God bless you, good fairy." The timbre of his voice was pleasant, too, which made Nancy linger a few more minutes near the man, even though she was terribly late for work. She looked into his eyes and saw such sadness and longing in them that it struck her to the core. Even though his face was overgrown with stubble, he still looked manly and quite handsome. Again she wondered, what was the reason he was on the street? I want to know, but it is unseemly to pry into a man's soul like that, isn't it? Or should I ask, maybe he needs some help. In between clients and the endless running around, Nancy couldn't stand it and shared her observations with Cindy, telling her about the tramp who plays the guitar so well. She just waved it away irritably. "Oh, Nancy, what's on your mind? What do you care about that bum? You've got someone to worry about. They're all professionals. They know how to pity. You're just on his feet, began to earn enough money. She herself, remarkable girl, look out for rich clients, smile at them, and see who bites. You never know. What if you get lucky and marry well? You should think of the future, not waste your tips on bums. All the more reason for you to work so hard to get them." Nancy frowned and objected. "What a mercenary you are, Cindy. What about love? Feelings? You want it like in the movies and butterflies in the stomach, and one for life." Cindy laughed out loud. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. I've lived half my life, and I've never met anyone like that, so don't get your head in the clouds. A movie is a movie, but life is life. Stop talking. Bring your order to table 5 and hurry up." On the third day, Nancy, despite the fact that it was her day off, and she could have stayed in bed longer, got up early, baked some delicious pancakes, and raced to the restaurant. The tramp was there. He was humming a romantic tune, slowly strumming his guitar. Nancy stepped closer. The man recognized her and waved a greeting as if she were an old acquaintance. Nancy bought him coffee and treated him to dessert. He was sincerely happy, thanked her from the bottom of his heart, and started to devour the treat with great appetite. And Nancy felt something extraordinarily pleasant that the man, being in such a difficult situation, did not lose heart and looked forward to the future with hope. And this person seemed so close to her that seeing him became a need and a necessity for her. Nancy was now seeing her musician, as she called him, every day. They even became friends during this time. It turned out his name was Nick. The man spoke very little about himself and very reluctantly. Most of the time, he immediately switched the conversation to another topic. "Oh, Nansisha, life has taken such a turn that you wouldn't wish it on the enemy. I don't want to hurt my feelings, and I'm not used to complaining. It's not manly. Tell me about yourself. Why is such a beautiful girl suddenly alone? Where are the crowds of suitors? How did you even get into this restaurant? They say the owner's not nice. Doesn't he hurt you? Doesn't he hold back your salary?" Without knowing why, Nancy willingly told Nick about her life, her grief, her father, her mother, and her angry aunt Wendy. And gradually she felt better. And she had wanted to talk to someone about the restaurant for a long time, especially since she had no girlfriends or reliable friends. And Nick was a casual man, far from it, so he was allowed. Nancy told the man that things had been going very badly at the restaurant lately. Profits were falling before his eyes. Although recently there was no shortage of customers. The director is fierce, takes it out on his subordinates, yells day and night. Because of this, all the employees quarreled, suspecting each other of treason. The situation is heated to the limit. Working in such an atmosphere is simply unbearable. The owner let everything go on its own, as he has in the first place raucous parties, with girls of easy virtue, and also in the office all the time rotates some dubious personality. Finally, she added in a whisper, "You know, Nick, I even suspect that someone is distributing illegal substances among the customers, which is why there was an outflow of normal customers who came to eat and relax. But near the bar, I began to meet more often strange people who hardly order anything. And most importantly, the frantic money from somewhere the owner still comes out. I accidentally saw him counting huge bundles of bills, although officially we are on the verge of closing. Rumor has it that Liam even wants to sell the restaurant quickly and has invited potential buyers to a banquet on Monday to discuss the terms of the deal. I'm so worried. God forbid I should lose my job. I have no one to help me. I am alone in the world. I just got back on my feet, and now I'm doing it all over again." Nick began to encourage the girl. "Don't be sad, Nancy, and don't worry ahead of time. Sometimes it happens in life that you just have to wait, and the problem solves itself in some unfathomable way. I think everything will work out. Let me play you something soulful." Nick strummed his guitar and sang a heartfelt love song with the way he looked at Nancy. She even got goosebumps, either from the song or from that piercing look in her eyes. It was Nancy's shift on Monday, and from the morning the staff was running around like crazy, decorating the hall, since it was a custom banquet and getting ready for the visit of important people. Everything was shiny and sparkling, not a speck of dust or a grain of dirt anywhere. The master came out of his office to assess the situation. "As I said before, today is a very important day for me. Guests are coming from NMI. Make sure everything goes off without a hitch. Don't embarrass the place. All right, everybody. Don't sleep, don't yawn, don't move. All right, everybody, back to your desks." By 10 o'clock, a cortege of Jeeps and BMWs pulled up to the restaurant. Very respectable men entered the hall and began to seat themselves at the tables. Nancy hovered between them on unsteady legs and handed out delicacies. She looked impeccable and smiled politely at everyone, but inside she was very worried. Lord, I wish I hadn't embarrassed myself by mixing things up. I'll get kicked out for sure. In the midst of the banquet, there was a persistent knock on the back door. Nancy turned the key and was stunned. The tramp stood in front of her and whispered softly, "Let me explain later. That's the way it has to be." The frightened girl nodded her head in denial and was about to explain to Nick that this was not a good time. Otherwise, she would get in trouble and get kicked out. But he put his finger to his lips as a sign of silence and looked at her so expressively. She could not help it and let him in. She wailed to herself, "That's it, I'm finished. I'll have to look for a new job. The boss wouldn't forgive me. What have I done?" The banquet was in full swing when a vagrant from the street entered the hall. Liam shouted in anger, "What kind of phenomenon is this? Who let a bum in here? I'll fire the hell out of everybody. I don't serve on Mondays." But then, in front of an astonished audience, the tramp began to tear off his rags, his cap, and his false beard and mustache. In the blink of an eye, a perfectly decent middle-aged man appeared before them. He walked up to the restaurant owner and screamed in his face, "Hello, Liam. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. Surprised to see me? Did you think I'd rotted away in prison on your orders? No matter how many strings are tied, the end is still to come. Here it is, your end. So, for those of you who don't know, my name is Nick. I am the real owner of this place. It was my father's and then I inherited it. It's a family business." So Liam came to work for me, first as a waiter, then as a bartender, and then I foolishly promoted him to deputy. That's where the fun part started. This bastard decided to put me out of business and sit in my chair, and I have to say that he did it perfectly. He forged papers, I signed them without looking, because I trusted him, and I went to jail for fraud. But that wasn't enough for him, and he stole my wife. And to be sure to finish me off, he ordered my murder in prison. That's how he thanked me for everything. And now he's doing his dark business in my place, dealing weed, and enjoying his life. Right, Liam? There's one thing you miscalculated, motherfucker. I don't have any rotten friends, unlike you. They're few, but they're reliable, and they helped me appeal, prove my innocence, and get out. I watched you for a long time before I came here, and I know all about your black business. So now you can't get away with it. You'll be in jail like a sweetheart. I've got proof. The guests froze in surprise. They couldn't understand what was wrong. How could this happen? Could it really be true? Liam clutched his head. He hadn't expected to see his former companion, because he thought he was dead. The next events unfolded so rapidly and unexpectedly that it was like a blockbuster. Liam, realizing there was no turning back, suddenly grabbed a knife from the table and yelled, "Drop dead already." And he pounced on Nick. The same second, the task force burst into the room. They put everyone on the floor and started twisting Liam. Panic, screaming, women screaming, and total confusion ensued. Nancy screamed in horror in a voice not her own. "Call an ambulance. Get an ambulance. Save him, I beg you." She fell to her knees, put someone else's jacket under her head, and whispered, "Nick, don't die, please. I'm begging you. I need you. Do you understand? You have to live." The man nodded and smiled weakly, though he was as pale as chalk. Nevertheless, he could barely make it out. "It'll be all right, my good fairy. I'll have some more of your ruddy pancakes." And then he immediately blacked out. An ambulance arrived and Nick was taken on a stretcher to surgery. Nancy wanted to go with him, but they made her stay to testify. As soon as the girl was allowed to go, she immediately, without thinking, despite the late hour, rushed by cab to the hospital. She was told that an operation was in progress. Nancy paced back and forth in the corridor, unable to find her place for a second. She remembered the few prayers her mother had taught her as a child and asked the Lord that Nick would live. She wanted that very much. At last, the elderly surgeon came out to her and, looking at her frightened and crying face, informed her, "Don't worry, your fiancé is fine. The loss of blood was not so significant, and fortunately, the knives in the restaurant are not very long. So the wound was minor, the vital organs were not affected. But I can say with certainty, the perpetrator hit, right, almost to the heart. Go home, don't suffer, you can visit him tomorrow." Nancy looked pleadingly at the surgeon. "Thank you, doctor. I'll be going now. Just let me look at him for a second." Just a peek. The doctor took pity on the young beauty and led her into the ICU. Nick was sound asleep. He was still under anesthesia. The man was pale and gaunt, but breathing smoothly and calmly. Nancy leaned toward him and whispered softly, "Have a quick recovery, my Brahmin musician. I need you, do you hear?" She thought he smiled at her. Nancy kissed him on the cheek and walked out. With a light heart, she returned home, and tired and exhausted to the utmost after her shower, she fell asleep. The next morning, Nancy jumped up at dawn and ran to prepare a hospital transmission for Nick. She made a light chicken soup and fried pancakes, which the man liked so much. On the way, she bought some fruit and walked briskly into the ward. As she approached the room, however, she distinctly heard voices, a man's and a woman's. Strange, who could it be? Thought the girl, knocked, and entered unbeknownst to her. On a chair beside the bed sat a pretty girl, holding Nick's hand and wailing. "Cute, I'm so glad everything worked out. I was so worried about you. I was so worried about you. I'm so glad you're here now." The blood rushed to Nancy's temples and she felt sick. Wow, and he said he wasn't married. How could he? The girl put the bag of groceries on the nightstand with shaking hands and said hello. "Good morning, Nick. Have you come to your senses yet? How are you feeling?" Before the man could answer, the girl raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked, "Lover, who is that? Didn't you say you knew such pretty girls?" At this point, Nancy couldn't stand it anymore and said quietly, "I'm nobody, just a casual acquaintance. Get well, Nick, and I have to go now." She rushed out of the room, ran down the stairs, broke her heel on the way, and only in the street did she allow herself to cry. For some reason, she felt so bitter and hurt. She was angry and scolded herself. And what did you want? "We have known each other a week. What do you know about him?" "Nothing." He kept keeping silent, evading an answer. "Now I understand why. You idiot. You've been making up all these air castles and princes and love. It's true what Cindy said. There's no such thing as love. A tramp sang a masquerade song, and I swam away." The restaurant was temporarily closed until all the circumstances were cleared up, so Nancy roared at home, constantly depressed. She knew in her mind that she had to pull herself together, get up, find a new job, and forget this Nick like a bad dream. But at night she dreamed again of those bottomless and sad green eyes, of that tender love song that Nick often hummed. "I have you alone, like the moon in the night." She would wake up, and again the tears would roll down her cheeks. She missed Nick desperately. He was so deeply rooted in her soul that she couldn't forget him. After Nancy left the room that day, there was a big scandal. He was screaming, overcome by the intense pain in his wound. "Lola, what kind of a circus are you running here? Why did you come here in the first place? Who invited you? I thought you left me for Liam a year ago, screaming in my face that I was nothing, and he was a big businessman. That I don't appreciate you, and Liam loves you very much. So what's the big deal? Why aren't you with him right now? Get out of here right now. You made me hurt a very good man." The woman pouted her plump, brightly painted lips and blinked her eyelashes. "Cute, don't be angry. I made a mistake. I overreacted. Who doesn't? Liam was a horrible person, and he was a terrible person, and he didn't give me a damn. And anyway, I thought you were in jail. But now that I found out you were hurt in the hospital, I thought maybe we could try to get back together again. Honey, we used to have such a good time together." Nick turned red with anger. "I don't think you're hearing me at all. I'm not your baby or your sweetheart, and I never want to see you again. We have been divorced for a long time, and you are a stranger to me. For the last time, please go away. Otherwise, I'll call the guards." The woman hissed and hissed. "Ah, now I get it. So you dumped me for a young girl? You'll be sorry, you'll see. Goodbye, baby." The man was counting the minutes until he was discharged and missed Nancy very much. This young and insanely beautiful girl with such a kind and compassionate heart had his heart set on her. He wanted to sing and dance and create when she was around. He was well aware that Nancy had misunderstood and was greatly offended by seeing Lola in his room, so he hurried out of the hospital to explain himself to her quickly. Nancy, on the other hand, was looking through the job ads again. On one of the pages, she came across an interesting option. They were recruiting waitresses for a cruise ship, and it said the position was open for 6 months at a time. The girl reread it several times and suddenly thought, "Why, maybe I should take a chance. What is keeping me here? My parents are long gone, so is my job. Nick didn't need me for nothing, as it turned out. I'll go far away, out of sight and out of mind. At least I'll see the world." She went to the interview, passed with flying colors, and was hired. Her departure was scheduled for tomorrow. The girl packed her suitcase and stood at the train station, waiting for a chartered bus. Half an hour later, she sat in the back seat, staring sadly at the flickering crowns of trees and the winding, bumpy road that took her away from her hometown. For some reason, she felt so sick to her stomach that it was a wolf's cry. Nancy thought to herself, I'm unlucky. It's like someone cursed me. Just when things were beginning to click, everything fell apart again, like a house of cards. Why does it have to be like this? Suddenly, a BMW cut the bus off, blocked the road, and honked its horn desperately. The driver braked sharply, cursing as much as he could, and opened the door. Nick jumped out of the car and ran in. He apologized. "For God's sake, I'm sorry, but it's a matter of life and death." Walking further into the interior, the man finally saw Nancy and silently took her hand. "Please, come with me. I want to have a serious talk with you." He confidently got her luggage out of the bus and shouted to the driver, "Thank you, Commander. Go. I'll never forget it." He honked his horn and drove away. Nancy was in shock, unable to say a word, unable to believe her eyes. And Nick was talking as if he were in a hurry. "Nancy, honey, you've got it all wrong. That obnoxious person's name is Lola, my ex-wife, who cheated on me with Liam a year ago and left me. She and I are divorced. And now that Liam is about to go to jail, she suddenly decided to think of me. I didn't call her or invite her. She came on her own. After you left, I sent her away and explained once and for all that, between us, it was over and there was no going back. I could hardly wait until I was discharged. I kept waiting for you to thaw out and come, but you were still gone. I missed you so much. We had known each other not more than a month, but I felt like I had lost my closest person. I just got out of the hospital and came straight to you. I called and knocked on the door, alarmed all the neighbors. They told me that you had found a job on an airliner and that you were leaving today. I flew like crazy. I was afraid I wouldn't catch up. I made it, thank God. And why would you leave? Stupid. I'm the owner of the restaurant. We're opening next week. We just have to do things fundamentally differently to attract people again. I'm appointing you as manager and my proxy. No one can do it better than you. I trust you like I trust myself. I care about you. I do not understand what is happening to me. I do not understand yet. But I know one thing for sure. I sincerely want you to be there for me. Do you agree? If not, well, you're right. I'll take you now faster than the wind where necessary." Tears rolled down Nancy's face, and she threw herself on Nick's neck. "Of course I agree. Why did I decide to leave? I was so sick of being alone in an empty apartment. Nick, how bad I was without you. Sing me that song again, please." They stood for a long time, cuddled up on the side of the dusty highway, Nick whispering the same tune in her ear. "You're the only one I have, like the moon in the night, like a pine tree in the steppe, like a spring in the year." Nancy was melting and melting. She felt so good and easy, just like when she was a child, when her father rocked her on a huge swing. Exactly the same feeling of fear, joy, and absolute happiness. From that moment on, her life changed very dramatically. Nick appointed Nancy a manager with the right to select her own staff. The girl took the matter seriously. She decided to make the restaurant original, the kind of restaurant that hadn't been in town before. She named it The Generous Shop and ordered the interior to look like the old times. Wooden and carved elements, an attic, summer arbors, and tables. The dishes were also from an old cookbook she had kept at home from her great-grandmother. They hung banners all over the city and ran ads on social media. In addition to delicious food, Nancy organized a cultural program for visitors. During the day, there were various contests and raffles, and in the evening, there was a disco on the dance floor with a host. And people went. Everyone wondered what kind of restaurant had opened in place of the old one, with a dubious reputation. The common cause brought Nick and Nancy together, so much that they spent almost all their time together. They could no longer imagine life without each other, but they never got beyond half a hint and gentle kisses. Nick really wanted to continue, but he was afraid of scaring the girl. He understood that she had never been with anyone before, and she was also worried and afraid in her own way. And the difference of 12 years made him very uncomfortable. He tormented himself. Why would she want me? A grown man with a broken fate. After all, she's so tender and young. She has her whole life ahead of her. He didn't realize that Nancy was already burning with desire and kept worrying. Why is he pulling? Maybe he doesn't like me very much. Or am I doing something wrong? I haven't had any experience at all. After all the trials, Liam was given a huge sentence. All the machinations with the money were uncovered, and the trafficking of illegal substances was confirmed. A frustrated Lola was ranting and raving. Shit, how did I screw this up? Liam is in jail. Nick doesn't want to know me. They're threatening to foreclose on my house and want me to move out. Where am I supposed to move out? Out on the street? What am I gonna live on? I haven't worked a day in my life. What about the salons and boutiques? What am I supposed to do? Walk around like a beggar? No way. I've got to get rid of that snotty little girl who got in my way. Then I'll be able to seduce Nick like I used to. I know how to seduce men. In the woman's mind, a cunning plan began to take shape. She made inquiries about her rival and discovered that her aunt Wendy had long had it out for her, and also wanted to spoil things for the stubborn girl who had once been unwilling to share her living quarters. That's fine. I could use some help, she decided, and began to work on Nancy's relatives. Nancy's birthday was coming up. She was turning 20. Nick, upon learning of this, decided to throw a whole banquet at their restaurant and celebrate in a big way. He planned to ask her to marry him on the same day. He wanted his birthday to be a memorable one, to be able to remember it for years to come. Nick booked guitarists to perform, and at the end he decided to sing the song himself, the one she liked so much, and then ask for her hand in front of everyone. Shortly before this event, Aunt Wendy showed up unexpectedly at Nancy's house. She looked sad and started the conversation herself. Nancy, you see, I got laid off from my job. The company closed down. My husband, drinks like crazy. And David is still just sitting on my neck. I hear you're the big boss at the new restaurant now. Take me on as a cleaner or a dishwasher. I'm in desperate need of money right now, right to the brim. The girl hesitated for a long time. Those unpleasant episodes of her childhood, when she was fed like a beggar and treated like a servant, came to mind, but Nancy was a kind and unsparing person, so she went ahead and took her aunt to her place as a part-time dishwasher. A relative, after all. If only she had known the consequences. Wendy, hearing that Nancy was having a big birthday party at the restaurant, immediately called Leela from the back room. Listen, here's the thing, Nancy's birthday is coming up, and Nick decided to surprise her with a banquet and a marriage proposal. So make up your mind. It's either now or it's too late when she gets married. Or we'll put poison in her champagne, and that's it. No one will ever know. I get her apartment and you get Nick. I think we're all good. Where would I get the poison? Don't worry. I got a friend who works in the lab. I'll get it for you. Your job is to slip it in and make her drink it. All right? Just then, Cindy ran by and overheard the conversation. She was shocked. This is a conspiracy. They want to kill Nancy. There was no way the employee could let that happen, because she was madly grateful to that girl for not abandoning the restaurant, for making it thrive, and for calling her, Cindy, to work, paying her very generously. Cindy at first wanted to tell Nancy, but then decided against it. The co-worker knew well how kind, dreamy, and romantic she was, so she wouldn't believe her and wouldn't take her words seriously. Then Cindy made up her mind and went to Nick. She told him frankly about everything. She was very much afraid that the owner would not believe her and laugh. But surprisingly, the man listened to her very carefully. Thank you, Cindy, for your vigilance. We must be vigilant. I'll make sure nothing happens to Nancy. Those rascals, they won't let it go. Still jealous of other people's happiness. It's all right, I've solved Liam's case, and I'll take care of those chums. That same evening, Nick ordered and hidden cameras were installed throughout the restaurant. He also beefed up security and decided to dress a couple of people up as waiters to keep a watchful eye on Wendy. Nancy did not suspect anything until the last. After all, she had never celebrated her birthday in her life, not even in her early childhood. So it was just an ordinary day for her, a year older, that's all. At 9 o'clock, Nick unexpectedly picked her up and said in an intriguing voice, "Happy birthday, my good fairy. The miracles are beginning. Get ready and follow me." A surprised Nancy quickly packed up and got in the car. What's he up to? No one's ever done anything for me on my birthday. First, Nick took her to an expensive clothing store. There, they were already waiting for her. The girls smiled sweetly and handed her a huge box, tied with a red satin ribbon, and said, "Happy birthday. This is for you." Nancy was stunned, and she went off to the dressing room. When she put on a chic turquoise chiffon dress and elegant shoes with comfortable heels, she just glowed, twirling in front of the mirror. When Nick saw her, he held up his finger. "Great. It suits you very well, just like a queen." The girls called out to her, "Nancy, come with us. Your fiancé has ordered another gift for you." Nancy was taken to the hairdresser's, and in half an hour she had her hair and fresh makeup done. The girl was glowing. What a Nick. What a surprise. But that wasn't all the surprises. Next, they went to a restaurant. Strange, thought Nancy. We weren't working today. As they entered, the lights in the hall came on abruptly, and all the staff and guests cheered in one voice. "Happy birthday, Nancy." And let dozens of colorful inflatable balloons fly into the ceiling. The table was set up gorgeous. Nick took the microphone and announced, "Dear staff and guests, today is a very important day for me. My bride, Nancy, was born. I decided to make a surprise for her and invited all of you to celebrate this holiday with friendship and fun. So sit down at the table and let's have fun. Contests and performances of famous musicians are waiting for you. And in the end, a surprise. So let's begin." Everyone sat down and began to eat and enjoy themselves. Nancy couldn't hide her emotions and thanked Nick profusely. "Thank you, honey. I've never had a holiday like this. You are the best. I will remember this day for the rest of my life." Nick winked conspiratorially. "That's not all the surprises. Remember, the main one will be ahead. In the meantime, let's have fun." Suddenly he noticed that Lola had entered the hall. The man tensed, but Nancy didn't say anything, just said something over the radio to his security guys. Lola stealthily slipped into the back room, and she and Wendy poured the contents of the ampoule into a glass of champagne. The woman said, "That's it, you little brat. It'll be your last birthday. Look at her, everything on a silver platter. And I'm going to the trash." Lola smirked maliciously and walked with the glass into the hall. She walked over to Nancy and Nick's table and started, "Nancy, I came to wish you a happy birthday. I'm sorry about that time in the hospital. Those were memories of the past, nothing more. I wish you and Nick happiness. Be well." And she was about to hold out her glass, but Nick deftly intercepted it. "Thank you, Lola. I'll pour Nancy some myself. And you drink from this one. Well, bottoms up. Here's to my bride's health." The woman's face changed, her hand trembled, she dropped the glass, and it fell and shattered. A surprised Nancy didn't understand anything, and Nick said, "It's for luck. Come on, I'll walk you out. You have to go now, don't you?" He deftly grasped her hand in a deadly grip and led her to the exit. On the way, Nancy smiled charmingly. "Sweetheart, I'll be right there. Don't miss me." Immediately, Cindy jumped up to Nancy and dragged her into another contest. Nick took Lola outside. There, the security guys were already waiting for them. They were already holding the trembling Wendy. She made a fool of herself and was indignant. "What's going on? What right do you have? I actually work here." Nick barked at her. "Shut your mouth, and both of you listen up. All of your shady dealings and putting poison in Nancy's glass are on video. So you're both going to follow Liam to jail. I hope this teaches you something." Lola and Wendy cried out and begged for forgiveness. "I'm sorry, Nick. I was crazy. I was jealous. We'll never do it again, I swear. Don't go to jail. Please," he said sternly. "All right. The tape stays in my safe. You, Lola, get out of town for good tonight. And I don't want to see you ever again. And you, Wendy, make sure I never see or hear from you again. Remember, God forbid, you ever poke around Nancy again, you'll have to deal with me. I'll tear you to pieces. Get out, you jealous hens." Nick went back to Nancy, put his arm around her, and said, "That's it, honey. Wendy doesn't work here anymore. And Lola's leaving town today, so let's forget about those awful women. Now get ready and keep your eyes on the stage. I've got a surprise for you." And the groom ran off somewhere. After about 10 minutes, Nick came on stage with his guitar, sat down on a chair, took the microphone, and said, looking her straight in the eye, "Dear Nancy, my favorite girl, just today, on your birthday, I want to tell you the most important words. I love you very much. Marry me. And while you're thinking, I'll play your favorite song." The man began strumming the strings and began to sing, "You're the only one I have, like the moon in the night." Nancy was happy and touched to her heart. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She was singing along and clapping. Nick finished, got down on one knee, and put a diamond engagement ring on her finger. The girl took the microphone and answered in a trembling voice, "I agree, Nick. I love you more than life. You are the best man on the planet." The young men kissed passionately, and the guests applauded. Many of them even cried. That night, Nick took Nancy to his place. They kissed without stopping, like hungry for each other lovebirds. Until morning, their passion boiled over. They could not get enough of each other and were drowning in the abyss of passion. They both fell asleep only in the morning. The alarm clock rang unexpectedly and deafeningly loud. Nancy and Nick jumped up and jumped automatically out of bed, nearly bumping into each other with their foreheads. Then they woke up and laughed and fell back onto the couch. Nick hugged Nancy and said cheerfully, "Good morning, my fairy. Here we are together meeting the dawn. I owe you my Turkish coffee, and you owe me my favorite pancakes." Nancy kissed him on the nose and ran, elated, to make breakfast for the best man on the planet. A month later, the couple had a big wedding with lots of guests, press, and reporters. Nancy was so beautiful, and there was absolute happiness in her eyes. Nick proudly held his treasure under his arm, as if he was afraid that she would be stolen at any moment. Everyone congratulated the young ones and wished them the best. Cindy was kindly envious of Nancy and said, congratulating her, "So, our girl, you've waited for your prince, just like in a fairy tale. So much for the bum with a guitar. I take it back. And I look at you and I understand that there really is that unearthly love. You proved it to me with your example." The business flourished and expanded, and Nancy skillfully kept the books and managed the staff. She was loved for her straightforwardness and honesty, and for paying her staff generously. They soon added a Russian bathhouse to the restaurant, so customers could take a steam bath, and then a courtyard with a small pond into which fry were stocked. Now everyone who wished could fish and have it baked on the fire in front of him. Everything was so homely and hearty that there was never a shortage of visitors. And it was only an angry, aging Wendy who, when she saw the news about Nancy's wedding and restaurant on TV, was burning with hate inside. Especially when she looked at the dilapidated walls of her apartment, her drunken husband snoring on the couch, and David, an obese brat who was still loafing around, playing computer games and not wanting to do anything. She resented. Why does that orphan get everything and she gets nothing? It's not fair. She didn't realize that Nancy had suffered and fully deserved all this, because despite all the hardships of life, she was not calloused and her heart was still kind and responsive.